So the next panel, and it's our last of the day, so thank you for sticking with us. I cannot believe that the room is still at 95% capacity. It's really remarkable, and I hope you're not too emotionally drained from the inspiring conversations. But this last panel is going to be one of the best. And LA is such a dynamic place, multicultural hotpot. Can you tell I love food? Melting pot. Whether it's media, film, hospitality, art, there are just so many industries that are so prevalent in LA, and I think we can call LA the cultural capital of the world. Do you guys believe that? Yes. So the next panel is titled Creativity in Business and Why LA is the Place to Be. So our 3 featured guests and speakers are from 3 different major companies that have become cultural phenomenons, and they've brought about projects and work that have become, whether it's billion-dollar assets or just the thing that you need to know about next. And so if they're ready, I would love to introduce Tiffany Kumar from Spotify, Naya Kirkendall from Warner Brothers Pictures, and Kelly Sodden from the Ace Hotel. I'm gonna moderate this one myself, and I'm really excited that these are ladies that I've also gotten to know over the past couple of years here in LA.
Hi, Susie. Hello.
Hello. Brought my, don't know why, but
Hello.
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 Hi.
So to start, we were talking about creativity in business in Los Angeles and why LA is such a dynamic place to be, and how each of you in your careers as leaders who happen to be women in their respective fields have carved out a path for yourselves and other women. So briefly, I did a brief introduction, but I would love to get each of your stories and how you got to do what you're doing now and why you love it.
I'll start. I began my career in New York City, where I went to school, and my first job was with Kanye West. He was before he had ever dropped an album or was famous, so this was a while ago. And I've worn a lot of different hats in the music industry since then. I actually was a songwriter myself, and I was on the show Making the Band, which was on MTV at the time. So I was in Miami filming that, actually. And then, again, transferred back onto the executive side as a publisher at 2 independent publishing companies, one called Primary Wave, which had iconic catalogs from Nirvana to Hall & Oates, and then Lady Gaga's producer, and his publishing company, Red One. And then that brought me to Spotify. And so in the middle of that, so as I was a publisher is when I moved to LA, and I did everything not to move to LA. But I was just it's just not as cultured, and all. I just had all these different feelings about loving New York so much and not wanting to leave New York. But really, the music industry had migrated there, and especially for all of the hits that we know and love, they're all made in LA, and I'd say a large portion of them. And so that's where I needed to be, and I've been in LA now for the last 5 years.
So I'm sitting here trying to figure out how to truncate because every year the story gets longer and longer. So the short version is I grew up in LA, went to the East Coast for school, went straight to New York and was working in New York, corporate media. I was working in corporate communications for Viacom. So it was the beginning of my career. I was the editorial associate. So I was the kid who could write and would write speeches and shareholder newsletters and put out quarterly earnings and kind of talking points on MTV in China, whatever was needed. I would kind of write the first drafts of it and quickly became bored with that because I was very creative growing up, very much into storytelling, and as an undergrad kind of played with getting my PhD in film theory and anthropology, and took time off to go to New York and work because I just wanted to make money and have a job and be a regular person before going back to school for 6 or 7 more years. So I was in New York City and actually ended up at Viacom for about 4 years. And kind of halfway through that experience, and by the way, living in New York City in my early 20s, living a great, fabulous New York City life. But so was really, really into it. Had a very exciting job, a job where I really interfaced with Paramount, MTV, CBS, BET, like all these companies that Viacom owned. And I remember at a certain point feeling really jealous because all of my friends who were all like creative and they were all at MTV and they were all creative and I would have to be in like an office writing about the movie or the content and I felt like an outsider looking in. And so I started just on the side as a hobby writing film criticism for an online magazine. Got to go to free movies, got to just kind of write about what I loved. And that evolved into an internship doing script coverage for Killer Films, which at the time had just made a movie, Boys Don't Cry, that won the Oscar, and I loved it, so I really respected the producers. And so I started doing script coverage for them. Through that, I somehow met Lee Daniels, started doing script coverage for him. Script coverage is essentially a book report for scripts. And so soon was like really involved in the indie film scene in New York, although I had a day job that, I would work, 9 to 5 and then go uptown or downtown to do film stuff. And finally, a producer friend of mine who I'd gotten to know through the couple of years of doing these things on the side called me up and said, the Sundance Directors Lab is looking for a PA. You and I both know you're more creative than this and this corporate job is not for you. And so I ended up quitting my job. My parents freaked out. Going to Sundance for like the summer to PA, to be an intern essentially for the Sundance Directors Lab. And that was when I decided this is what I'm doing, no compromise. Moved back to LA, started as an assistant at a production company and worked my way up. Assistant at a production company, I went from Beacon Pictures to Fox as a junior executive and then went from Fox to Warner Brothers as a junior executive and worked my way up at Warner Brothers. I've been there for 9 years, so.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Nice. Hi, everyone. So I'm Kelly Sodden. I'm one of the partners at Ace Hotels. I actually got started, I'm originally from Orange County. Went to college, was kind of, biomed major, then I turned to political science major, and then, decided to just stick with that, but not really knowing what I wanted to do, after school. Moved to Seattle, and in Seattle is where I met Alex Calderwood, one of the founders of Ace, and a serial entrepreneur. He had a number of other businesses that he started and grew, and some he sold off and some he hung on to. So he really became my mentor at that time. I ended up running an event agency that he had based out of Seattle called Never Stop. So we would do, large concerts, we'd do pop-up shops, we'd do fashion shows, all around the globe. We do, Nike would hire us for the Olympics to do, takeover in Beijing and weird, crazy ideas that, marketing people would come up with and they'd approach our company because we were sort of the type of people that, give us a problem and we'll figure it out. And we're probably one of the only few companies that's crazy enough to say yes. So, really just taking on a lot of very scary projects at that time because there weren't, a lot of examples that we could follow. So was doing that for a while. They offered me to become a partner at that company, but Alex had the hotel in Seattle and really wanted to shift his focus from that into the hotel business. So as he started really trying to find new projects, they landed a hotel in Portland. And I think at that point he really wanted to, his other business partner wasn't involved in the hotel, and so he really was courting me for some time. And to me, I didn't really have the vision that he had at that time, like to really see this company grow. And for me, I was like, I don't want to work in a hotel. I don't want to, be a salesperson or GM or any of that stuff. That's not really where my interest lies. And he, really courted me and was like, no, I see this as something much larger, and I think it's a way for us to take all of these various interests that you and I and the people around us have and bring them under one roof, from architecture to interior design to marketing to events to retail, apparel, all that kind of stuff. So really, I got started. I got sucked into that world very quickly. And it grew and became a partner as we, added on more and more hotels. So we have 9 currently, and we have a handful under development right now.
Thank you for that, ladies. Kelly, I want to start with you with a question. When the Ace came to Los Angeles, felt like a really big moment. And I think at the same time, the rideshare companies, Uber and Lyft and others, were starting to gain traction. And I think the combination of those companies and the Ace Hotel really changed the landscape for nightlife in LA, where you could start your night in Hollywood, go downtown, and then end up eating a late night meal in Koreatown. I did the food thing again. So LA just became this vibrant place where you didn't need to pick one geography within the larger area, and you could actually hop around, and Ace Hotel made downtown cool again. So I just want to ask for your experience on the Ace Los Angeles and the theater, and I knew it intimately, but I want you to be able to share that story with everybody.
So the project, we were looking to find a hotel property in LA for some time. We looked at a building in Little Armenia, and we were kind of, we've always been sort of the group that is not afraid to go into neighborhoods that, might not have a lot going on. And we happened to see this building in downtown LA, walked in and saw this theater, this incredible historic theater that, United Artists founded. It was Mary Pickford, Charlie Chaplin, Douglas Fairbanks, and D.W. Griffith. So it had this incredible, history in Los Angeles, and this theater had really been untouched. It had been, preserved over the years, and for us, we saw that as a opportunity to be able to work with partners in both music and film and literature and a lot of different mediums, and to be able to have a home for them to come and actually perform and work with us. So that downtown LA at the time, there were a few things that were happening, but it really was it was still somewhat sleepy. And I think that the Ubers and the Lyfts and the ride sharing sort of companies helped, as you said, allow people to be able to go there, and then maybe they're going to come see a show, and then afterwards they're going to go get dinner somewhere else. And so I think they definitely helped our business really stabilize very quickly, because people were popping around town, and downtown wasn't so far and so crazy of a destination at that point.
Who's been to the Ace Theater, the theater at the Ace?
Oh, amazing!
Wow.
Nice.
I had the pleasure to get to know Kelly just a little bit through a project about 3 or 4 years ago. And it was the 1-year anniversary of the theater in LA and the Ace property in LA. And we got to bring a Warner Brothers film, Inherent Vice, and do a global partnership with Ace in New York, LA, and in London. And it was Paul Thomas Anderson and Inherent Vice with Joaquin Phoenix, and just an incredible brand partnership that the tone and the authenticity of the film and the director, as well as the hotel, it just really matched. And I heard and knew of Kelly from there and got to meet her and was blown away, and just saw another woman in leadership in an industry that's probably also dominated by men, and just thought Kelly is somebody I really want to stay in touch with for many years. And on the note of Warner Brothers, I also had the pleasure of working with Warner Brothers for many years, and Naya's name came up years on end. And I want to ask her specifically, and I want her to share the story of a specific project that she spearheaded, greenlit, developed, and saw to market with a tremendous response. And I'm not going to spoil what film that was, but maybe we can ask for a show of hands after you share about who's seen that film, because it was everywhere this year.
A lot of people are scared. A lot of my family has not seen the film because they're afraid. But so I think you're referencing It. Stephen King's It. So who has seen It? Pennywise. Lots of Pennywises for Halloween.
Yeah.
So just talk about the process of it. So it's interesting, the film business is, every project is different in terms of the path of it. Some movies I've worked on and got them from development to theaters within like a year and a half. Some take far longer. This I've been on for 9 years, been at Warner Brothers for 9.5 years. When I started at Warner Brothers, Warner Brothers Television actually did the miniseries. And so we own the rights to the book. And when I first started at Warner Brothers, the producers had just started kind of advocating and saying to my bosses at Warner Brothers that this should be a movie. We were looking for, all studios are always looking for IP, intellectual property, brands, things that have some awareness to them to turn into film and distribute. And so I was assigned to that project as a junior executive. And am a huge nerd and had read the book years ago, and have read most of the books that I've worked on years ago, and loved it, loved Stephen King. And so it was really exciting to be on that project, and we actually developed it for quite a long time because it was very difficult. What you guys see now is 2 different movies. Well, the first part is what's in theaters. The second part will be in theaters in 2 years, and the first part is the kid's story, for those of you who know the story. The second part will be the adult story. And we struggled quite a long time with writing that script in terms of because we were trying to fit everything into one. And it wasn't until we hired Cary Fukunaga, who at the time had not made True Detective yet. We knew him from, we had been tracking him since Sin Nombre, his first independent film. Then he did Jane Eyre, and off of Jane Eyre, we were like, we want to be in business with him. So I'd met him several times, the studio had met him several times, and he came in and was like, the one thing you guys have that I want to do is it. And I want to do it as 2 movies. And we were like, oh, interesting. Because it's him, we'll try it. So we tried it, the 2 movies, and he turned in the first draft as he was, I'm trying to remember the timeline of this. He turned in the first draft as he was shooting True Detective. And it was okay, it was the first draft, it was okay. I remember flying out to meet him. He wrote it as he was shooting the True Detective, turned it in just at the end of True Detective, shooting it. I flew out to meet him and go through the script and give notes on the script and kind of really work through what is this gonna be, just as he was starting post on True Detective. And he turned in the second draft of it, which was an amazing draft, and that was the draft that got greenlit, just as the show was airing and becoming really critically acclaimed, which was perfect timing. And so he actually hired Pennywise to come in and deliver it to me in a staff meeting. So it was quite interesting. There's video of it. A little balloon flying into the room and then Pennywise coming in with the script. So it was very exciting because we had a draft that was really amazing, and then we had this director that all of a sudden was really hot, and was getting nominated and all these things, and so we started prepping that movie. He went to go shoot another movie, Beast of No Nation. Then he came back, we started prepping the movie. And when the movie got greenlit, my boss came to me and basically said, we love this, great job. The movie's gonna be greenlit. That's so many movies we have in development, and a very small percentage of them actually gets made and gets greenlit. So my job, part of my job is advocating and fighting for these movies and these things that I really care about, right? And so, but it's oftentimes doesn't happen. So to get a green light is so it was greenlit. So he comes to me and says, New Line, I want New Line. New Line is the home for horror. They have this history of doing horror. They'd just done The Conjuring. It was very successful. So they were moving into more elevated horror. We really want this to go through New Line. So I partnered with New Line. It ended up going through New Line. I partnered with my colleagues there, reported to a completely different boss on this movie, and we ended up losing Cary, bringing on Andy Muschietti, who was really fascinating and interesting and came in and pitched and drew the characters as he was pitching. It was like a 2-hour pitch. And it turned out to be what it turned out to be, so.
And just
Did I miss something? Was there something specific you wanted to?
I want you to just share. It seems like some people haven't seen the movie yet, but the reaction to the film is global and it's tremendous. What was that figure? Box office.
It's still going. So I don't even know what the figure is right now. I actually tend to not, there's certain things you can't miss because this was so huge. But I tend to not read everything and not study. But it's the highest grossing horror film ever.
That's what
I think it
deserves a round of applause. The highest grossing horror film
it may be the
ever.
highest grossing movie in September, released in September ever. So there's definitely some stats that you can't. If you dwell on that, you're like, I'm on to the next. So.
Amazing. So Tiffany. I would love to hear more about your role at Spotify and how it came to be, because it's a unique one, and the love project that you've been on for the past year and just culminated in a big moment last night. So you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yes.
I'd love you to share.
I came to Spotify about a year ago now, and the title was Global Head of Songwriter Relations. And I'd been a publisher for so many years, but that title is like a unicorn department for a streaming company. It's like doesn't exist, so there's no roadmap to what it is. Me and my boss, Troy Carter, were very much like, okay, like you're here now, like now, what is this department? And a lot of it was like Spotify, like growing so rapidly as a company, and like I mean, just like in headcount and like just like scope of team members growing and carving out what the songwriter relations department meant and what that is. And you know, it could have gone like in a way that was like felt like very corporate, but it ended up going in a very creative way. Like, and when like meaning the department is now like very instrumental in bringing creativity to Spotify and like pulling back the curtain behind all of the hits and like big streaming songs to the writers and producers and publishers that like in many cases have more streams on Spotify than the artists that they're writing for. For example, Savan Kotecha is a songwriter. He wrote Problem for Ariana Grande. He wrote Can't Feel My Face for The Weeknd. He's written a number of songs for One Direction and Katy Perry and so many hits, and he definitely has more streams on Spotify than some of the artists that he's written for. And there's like many others like that that are very much the unsung hero that we never hear about. So, you know, in a way, Spotify was doing an amazing job at partnering with artists, and you'll see a lot of the marketing and the billboards and the new releases and the playlisting, but you know, we were, I guess like in a way not partnering as well with the songwriters, and so now we're kind of like the door is open and it's bringing visibility to them. So we've done like a billboards, you know, in many cities around the world of songwriters actually, and we've done playlists. So we've launched this brand within Spotify now called Secret Genius, and it's a playlist listing all the songs by the same songwriter or producer. It's a podcast on Spotify. We have an ambassador list of 13 songwriters right now. Every June we renew that list. Savan Kotecha, who I mentioned, is one of our ambassadors, and they all host what we call song shops, which are like writing camps around the world, and we film them, and we're going to put the content on Spotify so that, you know, our users can really see this process. And you know, right now the technology is catching up with credits and all these amazing tools that we can have, like by searching for songwriter and all these things that we can you know, add to the product. But right now you can search by songwriter and listen to the podcasts and see the playlists and all of that. And it's been, like I said, like a very like pioneering thing for a streaming company to do and put resources behind. And last night we had the first ever award show for Spotify, and instead of it being for artists, it was the Secret Genius Award Show, and it honored songwriters and producers, and Max Martin was there, and Babyface, and Quincy Jones, Rick Rubin was honored, and Frank Ocean presented Rick with this amazing award. And Rick, if you guys don't know, has had like a 20-year career span from decades of amazing work in his catalog, and it was a great night of celebration.
Thank you, Tiffany. Tiffany and I have known each other for a year now, and I've seen her come in as one of the only women on the Spotify Creator Services leadership team. The only woman.
The only woman.
The only woman on the Spotify Creator Services team. And we actually share a boss in Troy Carter. And so Troy is a man of many jobs and many passions and many talents. He probably works the capacity of 10 people in one 5'6" body. And I've just seen how he's enabled Tiffany and how Tiffany has shown love to this unicorn department of herself and a few team members called the songwriting department, and you know, created this hot brand called Secret Genius. And people want the merch of Secret Genius. They want the t-shirts, they want the pillows. And I think it does an incredible service to the people behind the music and the artists that are so celebrated, but the people who've actually put the creative process in them. And so we are going through a crazy time in Hollywood, in music, and in Silicon Valley right now. And it feels like 2017, I guess, well, end of 2016 with the election and the inauguration, and then just, day after day, beating after beating of news and allegations and things that have been around for many years and very difficult, where women have felt silenced for many years. Things are coming to light now. And so without getting into too much, Debbie Downer talk, I have a two-part question for each of our speakers. And one is, we talked about how Tiffany and I share a boss in Troy. And to me, Troy has been such an incredible thought partner, leader, mentor, big brother, all of those things, because he grew up in a family of lots of women and has hired many female executives to run his companies and his teams. And so for me, he is like a true example of somebody who has given me the authority, the flexibility, the trust to go and create magic. And I feel like there are, like we honored the men in the room today, I feel like if you each can highlight one man that has been a partner to you in this career or in the past career, that would be lovely to share. And then the next question is going to be about, being a woman and being a leader in a creative industry that's dominated by men. How have you overcome obstacles, and what have you told yourself or done in terms of practices to get up every day and continue to do your work and, again, carve paths for yourself and other women behind you? Sorry, loaded question.
Several part question.
I mean, I can start because I can talk about Troy, and you just talked about Troy. So,
Perfect.
And I've now worked with Troy for a year, and I feel like Spotify, again, like being a big company, and me, like having worn the hat as a songwriter and been like, well, I'm a songwriter at heart, and I don't want to like have any of my creativity stifled by this like big company and like, barriers. And like there certainly were a lot of barriers, but I'll say, working for Troy, we were able to find a straight line to these goals. Like normally it's like, okay, roadblock left, roadblock right, okay. Like trying to figure it out, and to have that support has meant a lot to the growth of Secret Genius, the birth of Secret Genius in particular, but also the larger strategic goals that we're working on, and me also personally feeling still creative. And I don't write songs anymore myself, but I still like feel like my creative side is like being nourished. What was the second part of your question?
Adversity, overcoming adversity.
Oh,
Real talk.
Okay. Oh, I mean, this has been like, and it's ongoing throughout like anybody's career in so many different instances. But I'll talk about like kind of a recent one, which is like a year ago when I first got to Spotify, and just like, one thing is to notice the differences between being a female leader and a male leader, that there are differences in that, and that's like the first battle. When I did my first presentation, we had an offsite in Cuba, and like I bombed it. Like it was so embarrassing, and I had like 60 slides that I had to go through, and like it was just like, it was like not a good start. Like just out of like nervousness and feeling like my strategy or whatever, and then it was like trust your like team members, and I don't know, like in some way it just got totally turned around into really never. I've done so many presentations since then, and really like learning from that experience and being like, you know what, it's okay to mess up sometimes and keep it moving.
So, okay, first part of the question, I definitely had my first boss in LA in the movie business when I was an assistant. He actually hired me basically over the phone when I was still living in New York and was like, how soon can you get to LA? And I do have to meet you before you can start working here and make sure you're not crazy. So I got to LA and met him, and he ended up being so amazing to me. I ended up as his assistant for about 2 years. And what was really interesting about him is he just made a decision to mentor me and allow me. I was an assistant in a very small production company, which was great. It's a great place to learn. It's better to do that than to aspire to be at a big, flashy place, because I believe you learn less when you're at the beginning of your career. Because I was his creative executive, basically. I was his manager. I was reading everything for him. There were several books I wanted him to buy. I remember he said no, and they were in the trades. Like 2 weeks later, some studio had bought him, he apologized, or him giving me sets of his notes and saying, this is how you write notes. Here's 10 sets. I want you to study them because you're going to be writing notes for me. Or if there was a writer I loved, he would say, okay, I'm going to meet this writer. You'll be in the meeting with me. Even though I was his assistant, he treated me like I was more than that. So my second year there, this was actually a big breakthrough for me in my career. At the beginning of my career, I worked for Beacon Pictures, which made Bring It On. And so Bring It On, the home entertainment Bring It On franchise, has made a lot of money for Beacon Pictures and for Universal. And Bring It On 3 was coming up, Bring It On All or Nothing, which at the time starred Hayden Panettiere and Solange Knowles. And so no one wanted to do it because it was straight to DVD. It was a teenage, targeted cheerleading movie. Everybody had big Hollywood movies to work on. So my boss went to the president and said, let Nyjah do it. She's smart. She won't fuck it up, I promise. It's a small budget. It was like $8 million budget. But, let her get her feet wet and report to you on this. And so they let me basically be the executive on that movie. I hired the writer, I hired the director. I was on set. Luckily, set was in LA. I was still his assistant. They gave me a BlackBerry, a big brick BlackBerry, and I would be on set like confirming lunches for him while I was on set. So like now I think about it and I'm like, I don't think I'm that generous. Like, I would be like, where are you? You need to answer my phone. That was definitely, that really put me in the, I can go get an executive job world with that experience. And that was all because he decided to really be there for me in that way. So that's the first part of the question. Second part of the question, I think it's hard to just pinpoint one thing that kind of allows you to, overcome adversity or all the stuff that's going on in our world. And so I think there's a couple of things. One, we talk about mentorship a lot. I just talked about one of my first bosses. I have found, especially being a woman of color, that there are rare people, role models for me to look up to in terms of like, that's who I want to be, or that's who I can relate to, but what I have found is that I have a lot of peers that are actually my mentors, and we have come up together, and like, these are the folks that when something's going down in the office, even if they're competitors, we're more important to each other than the job is. So we'll call each other and kind of be like, this is what's the strategy, this is what's happening. Whenever there's like 2 or 3 of those types of peers, friends now, some of my best friends, who we have had each other's back continuously throughout the whole thing. And there's a job opening, whatever is going on. And so that has been really important. And then I think it's really, the great thing about the creative business, in my mind, is it's subjective. Like, we try to make it such a science and a strategy, and we're very risk. But at the end of the day, like, movie business is like, do I like the script? Do I think a billion people will like the script too? Which is a little daunting, but I think you really have to learn, and you have to learn this over time, to just trust yourself and trust that your opinion is just as valid as everyone else's in the room. And it is, because you bring a very specific perspective that no one else brings. So, and I make content for the world. So I'm making content for such a variety of people. So who can tell me that my perspective doesn't mean anything? And so kind of, reminding myself of that, I think, is really important. Also, that we're all really smart and we'll figure it out. I like to fake it till I make it a lot. So, because I figure I'll figure it out.
Yeah, I think for me, I'd mentioned him earlier. Alex Calderwood was really my mentor. We were best friends, and he was one of those people that he had started so many other businesses, and businesses that he had honestly no business starting. Like, he started a chain of barbershops called Rudy's, and his hair was like crazy fringy, like, super curly, and, he didn't really care about his hair. Like, he never spent time doing it and all that kind of stuff. But, he had an idea and he saw an opportunity in the market, and, he had a friend that was bald that wanted to start this with him. So, he was sort of one of those people that he's like, if you have a great idea and there's you think that there's a market for it, just go after it. As long as you're excited about it and you are passionate, like that, you can make it work. And so he was really one of those people that, when I first started, I went from, basically a production assistant to, heading up all of the events globally that we were doing at the event agency. And, for me, it was a very short window that jump happened, that transition. And I remember being, in my mid-20s and just being totally overwhelmed, like kind of freaked out, intimidated by that leap and by the fact that, we were doing, $1 million projects with huge corporate clients. And, he really was one of those people that he mentored a lot of different people and really taught them that it doesn't matter if you didn't have the education. It doesn't matter, if there's all these experts that are telling you, if you really believe in it and you have a point of view and a strong point of view, you can make it work. And so when I transitioned to ACE, I had no idea about really the hotel industry, and besides staying in lots of hotels. And he was one of those people that just kept saying, he was really there for me. Like, I'd ask questions, like writing down notes when we'd be in construction meetings. I'm like, what's that term? And he's like, you'll figure it out. And just one of those people that was like, it's not rocket science. It's not that complicated. And just follow your gut, follow your instincts, and the answer, you'll get to the right answer in the end. And ask questions and collaborate, be willing to collaborate with people and share what you don't know and ask questions, and then try and gather information from them, and you'll be surprised at how much that other person might not even know as well. And so I think he was a great mentor and a great friend. And then, I think going to the second part of the question, the hotel industry is very male dominated. Real estate development, which is, a big part of what we do, is also very male dominated. And, we're working with private equity funds, and, we're working with, a big portion of our company and business is male dominated. And, I think really what I had to learn early on was it's, just focus on, proving what you can do, and don't worry about, trying to convince them. Like, it's through your work and through your actions that people will realize that, like, just because you're a female and just because you're young and because you don't have a background in this business, that you're still totally capable and able to, really go after and pursue, huge real estate development projects.
Amazing, thank you. I feel like there was like nuggets of wisdom and advice, and kind of for women and men, just in the feedback. So thank you. We only have a few minutes left, but 2 minutes left. I want to ask one quick question. We'll do one brief question, and then maybe if there's one burning question, that's the best question ever, you can raise your hand. So think about the question. And so this question is about a challenge that you have, and then a big, hairy, audacious goal for yourself in the next 5-10 years. And I'll start with that. A challenge that I have is meeting the best and brightest early stage entrepreneurs from the earliest, when basically the idea is being formed, and how I can identify and partner from that early stage to think about how this is going to be a very big business and profitable and sustainable and a good value for humanity. And then a big, hairy, audacious goal for myself, and one that I set when I first started working with Troy Carter 2.5 years ago, is I've been in LA for 25 years, and I get to rep LA. I want to be, big, hairy, audacious goal, I want to be one of the baddest, most well-known, and most considered to be a thought partner investor that happens to be a woman here in Los Angeles. And so, and to me, organizing community and organizing like this is part of that journey. And I think we all have so much to learn from each other. And so, pass it on.
a current challenge of mine has really been, balancing like day-to-day work and short-term goals with, long-term strategy. And when do you find time for that? When you're just answering emails or, at meetings all day. And so that's been a challenge that I'm working on getting better at. And what was the second part? Susie?
Very audacious goal.
My goal. I guess the most concrete goal that I can say right now is really expanding Secret Genius as a brand within Spotify in all aspects of it.
So I'll be quick because there's lots of goals and always lots of challenges, but this is a challenge and a goal. There's a lot going on in the world today, and especially in issues of representation and just everything that's going on in Hollywood right now. And being who I am and in the position that I'm kind of uniquely suited to really impact it in a real way. And so it's both the challenge and the goal is to kind of use the time that I have while I'm in the seat that I'm in to figure out a way to kind of really impact diversity, representation, inclusion, like all the gender politics going on, everything that's going on, which there's not that many of me. So how do I use that effectively over the next couple of years?
And then really quickly, I think for me, it's, short-term goal is just getting better at really, letting go of things and allowing, as we're growing business, there's a lot of, growing pains and things that you need to figure out or problems that didn't exist before. And really just allowing, learning to let go of things and allow more people to make decisions that I might not necessarily have to weigh in on. And I think long-term goal, is really, how do you find that work-life balance? And I think for me, that's one of those things that I put so much myself, into learning an industry and trying to grow a business and really, having to focus on that, putting 95% of my time into that, and really just figuring out how to make sure that, as we're growing business, that that's not all consuming, and that the other aspects of my life, like wellness and family and friends and things like that, are also being taken care of.
Amazing. Well, unfortunately, we're out of time. I don't know if there was a burning question, but no hands. Okay. All right. Well, this panel about creative entrepreneurship wraps up our sessions for today. And I think before the applause for this panel, I think maybe Helena is going to come up and reintroduce Victory. But first and foremost, huge applause for this panel, please.
Can we take a photo together?
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you, ladies.
Yeah.